I think I didn't do anything wrong, just chose to follow my heart when my marriage felt empty. Now, I've received divorce papers at work. My husband's revenge is official, and everyone's taking his side. I never thought things would go this far, just because I wanted a little happiness. Before we dive deeper into the story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The suburban house on Maple Street had always felt like a prison to me. White picket fence, manicured lawn, the whole American dream package. But what good is a dream when you're sleepwalking through it? I'm Lenore Sable, 32 years old, and I work as a dental receptionist. Not exactly glamorous, but it pays the bills and gives me something to do while my husband Elliot disappears into his engineering projects. That Tuesday evening, I was deleting messages from Mark when I heard Elliot's key in the door. My heart jumped. He wasn't supposed to be home for another hour. I quickly swiped away the conversation and pretended to be scrolling through social media. "You're early," I said, not looking up from my phone. Elliot, 36 and perpetually serious, set down his briefcase with that methodical precision that drove me crazy. Project meeting got cancelled. Thought I'd actually have dinner with my family for once. There it was, that passive-aggressive tone wrapped in false reasonableness. I rolled my eyes. "Don't act like you're doing us some huge favor, Elliot. Clara's already eaten and gone to her room." "Where were you last night? You said you were working late, but Maya mentioned she called the clinic and they said you'd left at 5. My stomach tightened, but I'd learned to deflect these questions. Maya doesn't know everything about my schedule. We had inventory to finish in the back office. Not that you'd understand. You're never here to see how hard I actually work. Elliot's jaw tensed. "I work hard to provide for this family, Lenore. I thought that meant something to you." "Provide what? Money? A house? What about providing emotional support? What about actually being present?" I stood up, letting my indignation fuel the performance. "You come home, eat dinner in silence, disappear into your home office, and then wonder why I feel neglected." Our 7-year-old daughter Clara appeared in the doorway, her small face creased with worry. "Why are you and Daddy fighting again?" I immediately softened my voice, kneeling down to her level. "We're not fighting, sweetheart. We're just discussing grown-up things. Why don't you go finish your homework?" But Clara lingered, her eyes moving between us with an understanding that made me uncomfortable. Children see more than we think they do. After she left, Elliot sat heavily on the couch. "This isn't working, Lenore. We barely talk anymore unless we're arguing. You're distant, you're always on your phone, and Clara's starting to notice." "Maybe I'm distant because my husband treats me like a roommate instead of a wife," I shot back. "When's the last time you asked about my day? When's the last time you showed any interest in me as a person?" The truth was, Elliot had tried. He'd suggested date nights, asked about my work, even bought flowers for no reason. But I'd been so caught up in the excitement of Mark's attention that Elliot's efforts felt stale and obligatory. Mark made me feel alive, desired, interesting. Elliot just made me feel married. My phone buzzed with a text. I glanced at it instinctively. It was Mark asking if I could meet him tomorrow. When I looked up, Elliot was watching me with those dark eyes that used to make me feel safe, but now felt invasive. "Who was that?" he asked quietly. "Work. A patient rescheduling." The lie came so easily now. "See, this is what I mean. You're suspicious of everything I do. How is that a healthy marriage?" Elliot said nothing, but something shifted in his expression, a hardness I hadn't seen before. Later that night, as he worked in his office, I heard him making phone calls. The conversations were too quiet to make out, but the tone was different, purposeful, determined. When his mother Judith called the next morning, while he was in the shower, her voice was strained with worry. "Lenore, dear, is everything all right between you and Elliot? He sounded different when I spoke to him yesterday." Judith had always been traditional, the kind of woman who believed marriage was sacred and divorce was failure. At 62, she'd been married to Gordon for 40 years and couldn't understand why modern couples gave up so easily. "Everything's fine, Judith. You know how Elliot gets when work is stressful." I kept my voice light, but internally I was annoyed. The last thing I needed was my mother-in-law poking around in our business. "It's just that Clara seemed upset when we video called last week. She said Mommy and Daddy don't laugh anymore." Guilt twisted in my stomach, but I pushed it away. Children are dramatic. We're working through some things, but every couple does that. When Elliot came downstairs, I handed him the phone. "Your mother wants to talk to you." I watched his face as he spoke to her, noting how his voice became gentler, more patient. He'd always been good with his family, respectful to his parents, loving with Clara, but with me lately, there was only tension and suspicion. Maybe that was my fault. Maybe I'd created this distance because I needed to justify what I was doing with Mark. It's easier to betray someone when you've convinced yourself they deserve it. That evening, as I prepared for another late night at work, I found a note in my purse that made my blood run cold. "Your husband deserves the truth." The handwriting was unfamiliar, the paper plain. Someone knew. Someone was watching. But instead of fear, I felt a strange thrill. Maybe it was time for everything to come out in the open. Maybe Elliot needed to know that I wasn't going to keep living this half-life, pretending to be satisfied with his version of love. I crumpled the note and threw it away. If someone wanted to play games, I was ready. I had no idea how ready Elliot was too. The Riverside Dental Clinic wasn't much to look at. Beige walls, generic artwork, the perpetual smell of antiseptic and mint. But it had become my sanctuary, the place where I could be someone other than Elliot's wife or Clara's mother. Here, I was just Lenore, and Mark Voss made sure I remembered that. Mark was 33, single, and worked as a dental hygienist. He'd joined our practice 6 months ago, bringing with him an easy charm and a smile that made even the most anxious patients relax. More importantly, he made me feel seen in a way I'd forgotten was possible. "Morning, beautiful," he said as I settled into my reception desk chair. The clinic wouldn't open for another hour, giving us time to talk without Dr. Peterson or the other staff around. "You're in a good mood," I replied, but I was smiling despite myself. Mark had this effect on me. He made everything feel lighter. "How could I not be? I get to see you." He leaned against my desk, close enough that I could smell his cologne. "How was your evening with the husband?" I grimaced. "The usual. He's getting suspicious, asking questions about my schedule." "Maybe it's time to stop sneaking around." Mark's voice was casual, but there was something underneath it I couldn't quite read. "You're not happy, Lenore. Why keep pretending?" This was what I loved about Mark. He understood that I deserved better. He saw through Elliot's facade of being the perfect husband and recognized that I was suffocating in that sterile marriage. "It's complicated. There's Clara to think about, and you're making excuses." He touched my hand lightly. "Life's too short to waste it on someone who doesn't appreciate what he has." Before I could respond, the back door opened and Sandra, one of the dental assistants, walked in early. Mark smoothly moved away from my desk, but I caught Sandra's curious glance between us. "Morning, you two. You're here early." "Just catching up on some paperwork," I said, my voice steady. But my heart was racing. How long had she been standing there? What had she heard? The morning flew by in a blur of appointments and phone calls. Between patients, Mark and I exchanged glances, small smiles, and brief conversations that felt charged with electricity. It was intoxicating, this secret world we'd created. During my lunch break, he suggested we grab coffee at the shop next door. We found a corner table, and for 30 minutes, I felt like I was on a real date. Mark asked about my dreams, my opinions, my thoughts on everything from movies to politics. When was the last time Elliot had been curious about my inner life? "You're wasted in that marriage," Mark said, stirring his coffee. "You're smart, funny, beautiful. You should be with someone who sees that." "Someone like you?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Mark's smile was enigmatic. "I'm just saying you have options. You don't have to settle for being unappreciated." That afternoon, My sister Ivy called while I was filing patient records. At 29, Ivy was everything I sometimes wished I could be. Single, spontaneous, unapologetically selfish. "You sound different," she said after we'd chatted for a few minutes. "Happier. What's going on?" I glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "There's this guy at work." "Lenore, are you having an affair?" Her voice was excited rather than shocked. "It's not. We haven't. It's complicated." "Honey, life is complicated. Marriage to a boring engineer who takes you for granted? That's just settling." Ivy had never liked Elliot, thought he was too serious, too conventional. "You deserve passion. You deserve to feel alive." Her words echoed in my head for the rest of the day. When Mark suggested we extend our coffee break the next day to include lunch at his apartment, I found myself saying yes. Mark's place was the opposite of my suburban home. Modern, minimalist, with no family photos or children's artwork cluttering the surfaces. It felt like a space where I could be anyone I wanted to be. What happened there felt inevitable, like the natural conclusion to weeks of building tension. Afterward, as I lay in his arms, I felt more like myself than I had in years. "This is what you've been missing," Mark murmured against my hair. "This is what you deserve." But even as I basked in the afterglow, a part of me was calculating. How would I explain being gone so long? What would I tell Elliot if he asked about my day? The lies came easier than I expected. "Busy day at the clinic," I told Elliot that evening. "Dr. Peterson had us reorganizing the entire filing system." Elliot nodded absently, focused on helping Clara with her math homework. He didn't even look up. "See," I told myself, "this is exactly why I needed Mark." Elliot didn't care enough to be suspicious, but my friend Maya cared. When she stopped by the clinic the next day, she pulled me aside with concern written all over her face. "Lenore, what are you doing?" Maya Chen had been my closest friend since college, and she knew me well enough to see through my casual demeanor. "What do you mean?" "I mean the way you and that hygienist look at each other. The way you're glowing like a teenager with a crush. You're married, Lenore. You have a daughter." "I'm also a human being with feelings and needs," I snapped. "Just because I'm married doesn't mean I have to accept being ignored and taken for granted." Maya's expression softened. "Is it really that bad with Elliot? Because from the outside, he seems like a good man who loves you. You don't see what goes on behind closed doors. The emotional neglect, the way he prioritizes everything else over our relationship." Even as I said it, I knew I was exaggerating, but Maya's concern was making me defensive. "Have you tried talking to him? Marriage counseling? Why is it always the woman's job to fix everything?" I was getting angry now. Why can't people accept that sometimes marriages just don't work? Maya left looking troubled, and I realized I was losing allies. But I had Mark, and that felt like enough. The next morning, I arrived at work to find another note tucked under my keyboard. "He's planning something. Be careful." This time, instead of throwing it away, I showed it to Mark. "Probably just someone trying to stir up trouble," he said, but his expression was thoughtful. "Maybe we should cool things down for a while." "Cool things down?" The suggestion hit me like a slap. "Are you getting scared?" "I'm being practical. I don't need drama in my life, Lenore. I thought you understood that." For the first time, I saw Mark clearly, not as my romantic savior, but as a man who enjoyed the thrill of an affair without wanting the complications that came with it. The realization should have devastated me, but instead it made me angry. If everyone was going to treat me like the villain anyway, maybe it was time to stop sneaking around. Maybe it was time to force the issue and see who would stand by me when the truth came out. I was about to find out that the answer was almost no one. The Cornerstone Bistro had always been our family's go-to restaurant for special occasions. Elliot had proposed to me there 8 years ago, and we'd celebrated Clara's last 3 birthdays in their private dining room. So when Elliot suggested we meet his parents there for dinner on Saturday night, I should have known something was different. But I was distracted, riding high on the intoxicating mixture of rebellion and self-righteousness that had been building for weeks. Mark had been pulling away since the anonymous note started appearing, making excuses about keeping things professional. His rejection stung, but it also fueled my anger at the unfairness of it all. Why should I have to hide and sneak around? Why should I have to pretend to be happy in a marriage that felt like a prison? Judith and Gordon Sable were already seated when we arrived, Judith in her usual pearls and cardigan, Gordon silent and dignified at 65. Clara ran to hug her grandparents while Elliot pulled out my chair with the same mechanical courtesy he'd shown me for years. "You look lovely, dear," Judith said, though her smile seemed strained. "How are things at the clinic?" "Busy," I replied, noting how Elliot's jaw tightened at the mention of my work. "We have some new staff members who are very dedicated." The conversation started normally enough, Gordon asking about Clara's school, Judith sharing neighborhood gossip, Elliot discussing a bridge project he was working on. But I could feel an undercurrent of tension, like everyone was waiting for something. It was Clara who broke first. "Mummy, why don't you and Daddy hold hands anymore? Jenny's parents always hold hands at dinner." The silence that followed was deafening. Judith's fork paused halfway to her mouth, and Gordon's eyes flicked between Elliot and me with uncomfortable awareness. "People show affection in different ways, sweetheart," I said, but my voice sounded false even to me. "Your mother and I are going through a difficult time," Elliot said quietly. "Sometimes adults need space to figure things out." Something in his tone, so calm, so reasonable, ignited the anger I'd been carrying. Here he was, making me look like the problem again, painting himself as the patient, understanding husband dealing with his difficult wife. "Space," I repeated, letting the word hang in the air. "Is that what you call it when you ignore your wife for months? When you treat her like a piece of furniture?" "Lenore," Judith said softly, "perhaps this isn't the place." "No, I think it's exactly the place." I was warming up now, feeling the familiar rush of righteous indignation. Everyone always takes Elliot's side. Poor Elliot working so hard. Poor Elliot trying his best. But what about me? What about what I need? Elliot's voice remained maddeningly level. "What do you need, Lenore? Tell me, because I've been trying to figure it out for months. I need to feel alive. I need to feel wanted and appreciated and seen as more than just a mother and a housekeeper." The words were pouring out now, and I didn't care who heard them. I need passion and excitement, and someone who actually cares about my thoughts and feelings. "Someone like Mark Voss?" Elliot's question was so quiet, I almost missed it. The restaurant seemed to freeze around us. Judith's face went white. Gordon set down his water glass with deliberate care, and Clara looked confused and frightened. "How do you—" I started, then stopped myself. It didn't matter how he knew. I was tired of hiding, tired of being ashamed of wanting more than this beige existence. "Yes, like Mark, someone who sees me as a woman instead of just a wife." Judith made a small, wounded sound. "Lenore, you can't mean—" "I mean exactly what I said." I was standing now, my voice carrying to nearby tables. "I found someone who appreciates me, who makes me feel beautiful and interesting and alive. And you know what? I'm not sorry about it." The silence stretched out like a physical thing. Other diners had stopped eating to stare at our table. The waitress hovering nearby looked like she wanted to disappear. Gordon stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. Without a word, he walked out of the restaurant. Judith was crying now, quiet tears streaming down her cheeks. "How could you do this to my son, to Clara? We welcomed you into our family. We loved you like a daughter." "And I was grateful for that," I said, though my voice was shaking now. "But gratitude isn't love, and duty isn't happiness. I deserve to be happy." "At what cost?" Elliot asked, and for the first time his composure cracked. "At the cost of our daughter's security, our family, everything we built together." "What we built was a lie," I shot back. "A pretty suburban lie where everyone plays their role and pretends to be satisfied. Well, I'm done pretending." Clara was crying now, big silent tears that broke something inside me. But I was too far gone to stop, too committed to this path to back down. "I want a divorce, Elliot. I want to be free to live my life on my terms, with someone who actually wants me." Elliot looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something die in his eyes. The love, the hope, the willingness to fight for us, it all just disappeared. "All right," he said simply. Then he stood up, helped Clara out of her chair, and walked toward the exit. "Where are you going?" I called after him. He paused at the restaurant door. "To give you exactly what you want, Lenore. Your freedom." Judith stood to follow them, but she stopped at my chair first. "I hope it was worth it," she whispered. "I hope your happiness was worth destroying everything." Then I was alone at the table, aware of the stares and whispers from other diners, the weight of what I'd just done settling on my shoulders like a lead blanket. My phone buzzed, a text from my sister Ivy. "Holy shit, Lenore, Maya just called me. What the hell happened?" I realized that Maya must have been at the restaurant, must have witnessed the whole scene. The story would be all over town by morning. Another text, this one from Mark. "Heard about dinner. Think we should take a break until this blows over." Even in my emotional state, the message was clear. Mark didn't want to deal with the mess I'd created. He'd been happy to be my secret lover, but he had no interest in being my public salvation. I drove home to an empty house. Elliot had taken Clara to his parents, leaving me alone with the echoes of my own words and the growing realization that I might have just made the biggest mistake of my life. But it was too late for regrets now. The die was cast, the words were spoken, and everyone I'd counted on for support was backing away like I was radioactive. I'd wanted my freedom, and now I was about to find out exactly what that freedom would cost me. The house felt different when I woke up Sunday morning. Too quiet, too empty, like a stage set after the actors have gone home. Elliot's coffee mug wasn't in the sink, Clara's cartoons weren't playing in the living room, and the silence pressed against me like a physical weight. I called Clara's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. When I tried Elliot, he answered on the fourth ring. "She needs some time," he said before I could speak. "Last night was traumatic for her." "She's my daughter too. I have rights." "Yes, you do, and I'm not trying to keep her from you permanently. But right now, she's confused and hurt, and she needs stability." The reasonableness in his voice was infuriating. Even now, even after everything, he was being the mature one, the responsible parent. It made me feel like a child having a tantrum. "When can I see her?" "When you're ready to put her needs first instead of your own." The line went dead, and I threw my phone across the room, watching it skitter under the couch. How dare he act like I didn't love my daughter? How dare he turn her against me? Monday morning at the clinic was a nightmare. Sandra and the other staff members avoided eye contact, their conversation stopping abruptly when I walked by. Dr. Peterson called me into his office before we opened. "Lenore, I need to ask you about the situation with Mark." My stomach dropped. "What situation?" "The one that apparently played out at the Cornerstone Bistro Saturday night. Half the town was there, and the other half heard about it by Sunday morning." His expression was disappointed rather than angry, which somehow made it worse. I can't have this kind of drama affecting the practice. My personal life has nothing to do with my work performance. It does when it involves two of my employees and becomes public spectacle. He sighed heavily. "Mark has requested a transfer to our downtown location. I think that's best for everyone." So Mark was abandoning ship, leaving me to face the consequences alone. I shouldn't have been surprised, but the betrayal still stung. "What about me? Do I get transferred too?" "You can stay, but I need your word that there won't be any more drama. This is a professional environment, not a soap opera." I nodded, swallowing my pride. I needed this job, especially now. The day dragged on with patients cancelling appointments and phone calls that seemed to carry whispered judgments. Mrs. Henderson, who'd been coming to the practice for 15 years, couldn't meet my eyes when she checked out. The Johnsons rescheduled their family cleaning indefinitely. During my lunch break, I tried calling Maya, but she didn't answer. When I stopped by her house after work, she met me at the door with her arms crossed. "I can't believe you did that in front of Clara," she said without preamble. "Whatever problems you and Elliot had, that little girl didn't deserve to watch her family explode in a public restaurant. You don't understand the situation. I understand that you had an affair, and then humiliated your husband and in-laws in front of half the town. Maya's voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. I understand that you've been lying to everyone who cares about you, including me. I thought you were my friend. I was. But friends don't support friends when they're destroying innocent people's lives. She started to close the door, then paused. Get help, Lenore. Figure out why you need to hurt people to feel good about yourself. The door shut with a quiet click that felt like the end of everything. Tuesday brought a courier to the clinic with a manila envelope marked urgent, personal, and confidential. My hand shook as I opened it, though I knew what it would contain. Divorce papers, custody papers, and a thick stack of evidence that made my blood run cold. Printed emails between Mark and me. Bank statements showing charges at hotels I'd claimed were work expenses. Timestamps from the clinic's security system showing when I'd actually left work versus what I'd told Elliot. Even photos, Mark's car in the clinic parking lot during lunch breaks, me leaving his apartment building. There was a cover letter from Elliot's attorney, explaining that they were seeking primary custody of Clara based on adultery, abandonment of parental duties, and emotional instability demonstrated by public behavior. The evidence was damning, because it was all true. Every lie I'd told, every deception I'd crafted, every moment I'd chosen Mark over my family, it was all documented with the methodical precision that was so typically Elliot. I called him immediately, my voice shaking with rage and panic. How long have you been spying on me? I haven't been spying. I've been paying attention. There's a difference. You hired a private investigator. I hired a lawyer and asked him to document the facts. The facts you created, Lenore. You can't take Clara away from me. I'm her mother. And I'm her father. The parent who's been putting her needs first, who hasn't been lying and sneaking around, who hasn't traumatized her with public scenes. His voice was steady, implacable. You made your choices. Now you get to live with the consequences. That evening, I tried calling my sister Ivy, desperate for someone to take my side. Jesus, Lenore, she said after I'd explained the situation. I told you to live a little, not blow up your entire life. I thought you supported me. I supported you being happy. I didn't support you destroying your family and humiliating everyone who loves you. There was a long pause. Maybe you should have tried fixing your marriage before you decided to end it. Since when do you care about the sanctity of marriage? Since I watched my 7-year-old niece cry herself to sleep because she thinks Mommy doesn't love Daddy anymore. The line went quiet and I realized even Ivy was pulling away. By Wednesday, the isolation was complete. Co-workers avoided me, friends wouldn't return my calls, and even the grocery store checkout clerk, someone I'd chatted with for years, looked through me like I was invisible. I tried reaching out to Mark, thinking maybe we could weather this storm together, but his phone went straight to voicemail. When I drove by his apartment, his car was gone, and there was a "for rent" sign in the window. He'd disappeared completely, leaving me to face the wreckage alone. That night, sitting in my empty house with divorce papers spread across the kitchen table, I finally understood what I'd done. I'd traded everything real and solid in my life for a fantasy that evaporated the moment it was tested. But understanding and accepting are different things. Even as the evidence of my mistake surrounded me, part of me still felt justified. Part of me still believed that I deserved better than what Elliot had offered, that I'd been right to reach for something more. It would take the courtroom to finally show me how wrong I'd been about everything. The law offices of Brennan, Walsh and Associates occupied the top 3 floors of downtown's most prestigious building, all glass and marble, and the kind of quiet that money buys. I'd dressed carefully for this meeting, conservative navy suit, minimal makeup, hair pulled back in what I hoped looked like a responsible mother's style, rather than the desperate attempt at respectability it actually was. Elliot was already there when I arrived with my hastily hired attorney, a tired-looking man named Jim Kowalski, who'd been the only lawyer willing to take my case on short notice. Elliot sat at a polished conference table with 2 attorneys, a silver-haired man who radiated authority and a sharp-eyed woman who was arranging documents with military precision. This wasn't the Elliot I'd married, the quiet engineer who preferred solving problems with blueprints rather than confrontation. This man was composed, prepared, and surrounded by legal firepower that made my single attorney look like he'd wandered in from traffic court. "Mrs. Sable," the silver-haired attorney said, rising as I entered, "I'm Robert Brennan. Thank you for agreeing to this mediation session." Mediation. As if this was some kind of friendly negotiation instead of the systematic dismantling of my life. "Where's Clara?" I asked, ignoring the pleasantries. "I haven't seen my daughter in 4 days." "Clara is with her grandparents," Elliot said calmly. "She's been asking questions about why Mommy doesn't live at home anymore. We thought it best to wait until we have some answers." "I'm still her mother. I have rights." "Yes, you do," Brennan agreed, sliding a thick folder across the table. "And we're here to discuss exactly what those rights will look like going forward." I opened the folder and felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't just divorce papers. It was a complete reconstruction of my life over the past 6 months, documented with the kind of detail that only comes from professional investigation. There were photos of me entering Mark's apartment building, time-stamped and dated. Credit card receipts from hotels where I'd claimed to be working late. Phone records showing hundreds of texts and calls between Mark and me during work hours. Even my work computer's browsing history, showing personal emails and social media activity during clinic time. "How did you get all this?" I whispered. "Everything here was obtained legally," the female attorney, her nameplate read Jennifer Walsh, said briskly. "Financial records from joint accounts, phone records from the family plan, employment records that Dr. Peterson provided when subpoenaed." "You subpoenaed my boss?" "We subpoenaed your employment records when you claimed in your initial response that you were working excessive hours to support the family," Brennan explained. "The records show a different story." I looked at my attorney desperately, but Kowalski was studying the documents with the expression of a man watching a train wreck. "This is harassment," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. "You're trying to make me look like a terrible person." "We're documenting the facts," Walsh replied. "The interpretation is up to the court." Elliot spoke for the first time since I'd arrived. "Tell me about March 15th. The date meant nothing to me, but Walsh was already pulling out another document. "March 15th was Clara's school play. You missed it because you claimed to have a dental emergency at the clinic that required you to stay late." She slid a photo across the table. "This is you leaving Mark Voss's apartment at 8:47 p.m. that night. The play ended at 8:30. The photo was grainy but unmistakable. Me, walking to my car, with my hair messed up and my blouse wrinkled, while my daughter was probably looking for me in the school auditorium. One incident doesn't prove—" "April 3rd, Elliot said quietly. "Clara's parent-teacher conference." Another photo, another lie exposed. "April 22nd, her soccer game." "May 7th, her dental appointment that you, ironically, forgot to attend because you were with the dental hygienist." Each date was a nail in the coffin of my defense, each incident a moment when I'd chosen Mark over my daughter. Seeing them laid out like this, the pattern was undeniable and damning. "You've been planning this for weeks," I said, anger replacing shock. "You've been building a case against me while pretending to work things out." "I've been documenting the truth while hoping you'd come to your senses," Elliot replied. "I kept thinking you'd realize what you were throwing away and stop. But you didn't stop. You escalated." "The restaurant," I whispered. "The restaurant was your choice, Lenore. I gave you every opportunity to handle this privately, to consider Clara's well-being, to show some basic respect for our family. Instead, you chose to humiliate us all in the most public way possible." Brennan opened another folder. "We have 12 witnesses to your behavior that evening, including a video that someone posted to social media before taking it down. Would you like to review your statement to Mrs. Sable about deserving happiness at any cost?" I felt sick. Someone had recorded my meltdown and posted it online. How many people had seen it? How many people were talking about it? "What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Primary custody of Clara," Walsh said, reading from a document. "The family home, as it provides stability for the child. Division of assets based on the prenuptial agreement you signed, which includes a morality clause regarding adultery. Morality clause? Kowalski finally spoke up. It's standard in many prenups. Adultery affects the financial settlement. I stared at him. You didn't tell me that. You didn't ask about your prenup until yesterday. I assumed you'd read it when you signed it. 8 years ago, I'd signed the prenup without a thought, too in love to imagine needing protection. Now, those papers defined my punishment. Supervised visits, Brennan said, as if reading a weather report. I protested, but Elliot's voice cut through, calm but raw. You chose a man you barely knew over your daughter. She deserves protection from that kind of judgment. My lawyer didn't argue. The evidence is strong, he said softly. Focus on rebuilding, not fighting. I realized then that everyone in that room had already moved on. From me, from the excuses, from the version of myself I'd clung to. Elliot stayed behind only long enough to say, "It didn't have to be this way. You never gave us a chance." When he left, I sat surrounded by the proof of my own undoing. Every lie, every photograph, every missed opportunity. There was no one else to blame. The only question now was whether I'd finally learned the difference between being wronged and being wrong. The family court was nothing like on TV, just beige walls, fluorescent lights, and the quiet hum of judgment. Elliot sat calm and polished beside his lawyers, while mine looked defeated before the hearing even began. Judge Morrison wasted no time. "This isn't about your marriage, Mrs. Sable. It's about your daughter's well-being." Then she read each date like an indictment: school play, parent-teacher conference, dental appointment, all missed because I'd chosen my affair. When she quoted Clara's words, "I want Mommy to be happy, but not the kind that makes Daddy sad," something in me broke. The judge asked if I took responsibility. For the affair? The lies? The humiliation? I said yes to all of it. Elliot was granted full custody. I got supervised visits and mandatory counseling. As he left, he said softly, "Clara still loves you. Don't waste this chance." Alone in that sterile room, I finally understood. I hadn't lost a marriage. I'd lost myself. And the only way forward was to become someone my daughter could believe in again. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching. 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 You are watching.